A girl and her parents visited the school stadium to watch a football match. During the game, the adults suddenly realized that the girl was nowhere to be found and began searching for her. The police soon joined the search, unaware of the shocking revelations this investigation would uncover, eventually leading to a truth that shook their entire town. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007 in Scottsville, Kentucky. This small town with a population of just over 4,000 largely consisted of residents involved in farming. Most people knew each other, or at least someone from every local family. In Scottsville, as in many similar towns, there weren't many leisure activities available for the locals. Consequently, school sports became very popular among the residents. The local school had fairly large facilities for football, baseball, and even tennis. Various matches and competitions were regularly held there, becoming a kind of tradition for the residents to attend. Gabby's family was no exception. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. The eldest was on the school football team, and Gabby had started cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabby was 7, the main football match of the year was set to take place in their town. The best players from the school team were to play against a team from another county, and all the locals eagerly anticipated the event. Gabby's older brother was part of this team, but Gabby was more interested in playing and having fun with other children than the match itself. Her parents wanted to leave Gabby at home with their younger son under the supervision of a relative, but Gabby convinced them to take her along. On the evening of November 14th, they headed to the school field. Aside from the majority of locals who arrived to watch the match and support their team, many people also came from the other county. Upon arriving at the stadium, Gabby spotted her friends and asked her mom for permission to join them. The woman agreed but warned her not to leave the school grounds and to stay close to the other children. Afterward, Gabby's mother went to the stands while Gabby ran off to her friends. Gabby occasionally returned to her mom and then went back to play. She also went to her father, who was in a special room making announcements over the loudspeakers. Gabby asked for money to buy something tasty at the snack kiosk and ran off. Sometime later, Gabby's friends approached her mom in the stands. The woman quickly realized that her daughter was not among them. The girls asked if she had seen Gabby. They seemed visibly upset, and the woman replied that she hadn't seen her daughter for quite a while. Curious about what was going on, she listened as the girls explained that they decided to play hide and seek. Gabby was supposed to find them, and the girls hid in the bathroom. However, time passed and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls emerged from their hiding spot and went looking for her, but Gabby was nowhere to be found. They called out her name and checked all the places where they had played earlier, but it was as if their friend had vanished into thin air. Assuming that Gabby might have gone to the stands to see her mother, they rushed there. Gabby's mom immediately panicked and went to her husband, but Gabby was not there either. She told him that Gabby was missing, and the man quickly began searching around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the kiosk where her daughter wanted to buy snacks, looking for her there. Along the way, the parents informed acquaintances about their missing daughter. Eventually, other adults gradually joined them in the search. Having searched the entire area around the stadium and finding no trace of Gabby, the parents returned inside and made an announcement via the loudspeakers, hoping Gabby would hear it and return. However, this yielded no results. At that point, the game was in halftime and people were returning to the stands. The parents asked their acquaintances if they had seen Gabby, and some of them also joined the search. They set off again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on the lights around the baseball field, from which a path led to a small forest. The adults walked along it, but still failed to find the girl. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since her disappearance, and the parents decided to contact the police. Officers quickly arrived at the school, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabby's friends, and began searching. The local police department had no experience with such serious cases, as similar crimes rarely occurred in their small town. Nonetheless, The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario in which someone might have abducted the girl. In this case, they soon faced a problem. The perpetrator was likely at the stadium watching the game, which was about to finish any minute. Thus, the officers realized they had very little time before people, including the potential criminal, would start leaving for home. They decided to stop the game and completely lock down the stadium, keeping all the people inside. Officers monitored each exit to ensure no one could slip away. The police did not inform people of the situation, as it could have severely hindered the search. If everyone had known that the police suspected a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl was among them, the situation could have quickly spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, state police officers arrived at the school and began searching the area. They reached the baseball field and headed into the forest. After walking some distance into the trees, the officers stumbled upon a small creek and saw the girl's body in it. They immediately identified it as Gabby and called for an ambulance to transport her to medical examiners for analysis. However, even a visual inspection was enough to suggest that the cause of death was strangulation, as there were distinct marks visible on her neck. Additionally, some of her clothing was missing, leading the police to suspect that the victim had been assaulted. Gabby's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and assumed the police had found her daughter in need of medical attention. She rushed over, but officers stopped her from witnessing the horrific scene. Now facing a murder case, the officers decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gymnasium. Investigators were aware that the killer was likely among them, so they urgently needed a strategy to identify him. They spoke with Gabby's parents, explaining what they believed had happened to their daughter. The investigators asked if they had any suspicions about who might have committed such atrocities. Had they noticed anyone suspicious, or had someone threatened their family? Gabby's parents insisted they had no idea who could have done this. The detectives then spoke to Gabby's friends, asking if they'd seen anything unusual that evening, perhaps someone following them. But the girls couldn't recall anything of the sort. The police also brought them into the gym and asked them to carefully observe those present, hoping they might remember something. This, however, led nowhere. The lead detective suspected that Gabby's friends might have seen the abductor but were either too frightened to point him out or didn't understand the significance of their observations due to their age. He continued urging them to recount every detail of that evening. Finally, one girl mentioned that when they hid from Gabby in the bathroom, she saw a man standing outside. She couldn't remember many details about his appearance, except that he wore a denim jacket. Later, the police spoke with the ticket seller, who also recalled a man with a denim jacket draped over his arm. He added that the man seemed odd and intoxicated. Nonetheless, they couldn't establish his identity at that time. The police gradually interviewed match attendees, and soon everyone knew why they were being held there. Realizing they might be in the same room as the murderer, people were terrified but cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators cross-referenced the names of all men in the gym with the registry of sex offenders, but there were no matches. They also dispatched officers to the homes of several offenders living within a few dozen kilometers, but all had solid alibis and weren't near the school. Meanwhile, officers continued interviewing people at the school, and soon they had their first promising leads. Several individuals reported seeing a man named Timothy Madden behaving oddly near the women's restroom during the game. Being a local, many knew him. However, witnesses said Timothy's behavior that evening was unusual. They noted he wore a denim jacket, just like the one described by Gabby's friend, who spotted a man near the restroom. Another witness, a distant relative of Timothy, mentioned that during the game, Timothy wasn't himself. His youngest son was playing on the field, and typically Timothy was very engaged with his son's sports achievements. Yet that evening he wasn't even watching the field and appeared lost. Several other witnesses told the police that Timothy's behavior seemed strange to them. Consequently, the investigators decided to speak with him. By then it was night and they had to release most of the people from the school building. Ultimately, they chose to talk to Timothy, but first consulted the local sheriff for his opinion about him. The sheriff said he'd known Timothy practically his whole life and doubted he was capable of such a crime. Timothy barely had any criminal record aside from traffic fines and had never been involved in any suspicious activities. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children, so the police decided to visit him immediately. When Timothy answered the door, they asked if he knew why they were there. He replied that he had heard about the girl's murder, but claimed he had nothing to do with it. The detectives decided to use a trick question. They inquired if he had any explanation for the multiple video recordings they received, supposedly showing him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder. In truth, no such videos existed. The question was designed to see if the guilty party would reveal any new facts. Initially, Timothy said he didn't know, but then quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking with Gabby that evening near the stadium. According to him, he stepped out to smoke when several girls ran past him. Shortly after, Gabby approached him asking if he had seen her friends because they were playing hide and seek, and she needed to find them. Timothy pointed her in their direction and she ran off. The detectives found it suspicious how quickly Timothy altered his account. Furthermore, his story indicated he was the last person to speak with the victim before her disappearance, and there were no witnesses around. This positioned him as a possible perpetrator. The detectives also asked if he had an explanation should they find his DNA on the victim, to which Timothy calmly responded, "No." Finally, they requested a DNA sample and the clothes he wore at the stadium. He agreed to both requests, but once Timothy handed over his clothes, they noticed some stains. There appeared to be blood on the jeans, jacket, and underwear, prompting investigators to ask for an explanation. Timothy claimed they were out of their minds, insisting it was dirt, not blood. The police thought otherwise. Nevertheless, they needed the DNA analysis results, which meant they couldn't arrest him yet. Even though the case was given priority in the lab, it would still take days for the experts to examine all available samples and conduct the analysis. Soon, the coroner finished examining the body, confirming that Gabby died from manual strangulation. He also verified that the victim was violently assaulted and extracted the perpetrator's biological sample, which was immediately sent to the lab. The day after the murder, an unexpected event occurred. The police received an anonymous letter reporting a suspicious individual present at the game the previous day. He detailed the model of their car and even the license plate number, enabling investigators to swiftly identify the vehicle's owner. It turned out to be a student living just a 30-minute drive from Scottsville. When the police arrived to question him, the young man insisted he hadn't attended any game and was unaware of the murder. He added that he was working that evening, which the police confirmed with undeniable evidence of his alibi. Thus, the student was eliminated from the list of suspects, and the author of the letter was never found. Perhaps someone had tried to frame him or play a cruel joke, but the young man was indeed uninvolved. The police soon received another lead. Several individuals reported the bizarre behavior of a local 16-year-old boy. He had told various people that he was at the game, but later claimed he hadn't attended. The boy also mentioned seeing the girls playing hide and seek. The police identified this boy as the son of Timothy Madden. Yet this revelation was not the most astonishing. They discovered that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had become angry with his father and held a knife to his throat, threatening to kill him. Naturally, this was enough for the police to want to speak with him. However, they needed the presence of the minor's parents, and the mother refused to provide her son's DNA sample. Thus, the police left empty-handed, unable to gather any information or DNA. Given that Scottsville was a small town where most residents knew one another, rumors spread rapidly. News that the police were interested in the Madden family concerning Gabby's murder quickly circulated, leading to various theories. Some speculated that one of the older sons, known for their problematic nature, committed the murder. Others believed their father was responsible or that he was covering for his sons. Gabby's parents were also shocked by these rumors. Her father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and was familiar with his entire family. Their sons played on the same football team and their daughters were cheerleaders together. Both families were friends and even sat near each other at the game. Because of all this, Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that any of them could be directly involved in the murder. Following the rumors, something else occurred. The eldest Madden's son, who was 20, began sending threatening messages to local officers through social media, demanding they leave his family alone. He was swiftly arrested for these threats, and the police discovered an active arrest warrant for him in another town. He was suspected of assaulting a minor girl. During questioning, the young man admitted his frustration over the accusations against his family. He also claimed no involvement in the murder and maintained that he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town that evening. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, which was sent to the lab. On November 20th, 6 days after the murder, Gabby's funeral took place. Hundreds of people, not just from Scottsville but from other towns, came to bid her farewell. The girl's parents received significant financial support to cover the funeral and memorial expenses. Meanwhile, the lab completed the DNA analysis, comparing blood and semen samples with DNA from Timothy and his son. The results were a perfect match. The semen on the victim's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on his clothing was Gabby's. Upon receiving this news, detectives attended the funeral, and when Gabby's parents were alone, they informed them of the culprit's identification. At the same time, other officers arrived at Timothy's house, arresting him. As he was taken from the police station, he shouted to the gathered journalists that he was innocent. Later, he claimed the blood on his clothing was his, as he had scratched himself on a fence. Initially, he told the police it wasn't blood, but dirt. With the DNA match in hand, investigators turned the case over to the court, and the prosecution announced their intention to seek the death penalty. During preparations for the trial, Timothy's lawyer insisted on his client's innocence and questioned the origin of the evidence. He added that Timothy was at the stadium filming the game during the alleged murder, although Timothy himself told the police he saw Gabby at around the same time. The lawyer also highlighted that Gabby's body was found in a creek, yet Timothy's clothing was dry when he returned to the stadium. Timothy's mother, who lived with him, stated that he returned home in clean clothes, appeared calm, and behaved normally. However, the prosecution argued that these points were overshadowed by the fact that Timothy's semen was found on the victim's body. No other explanation sufficed, leaving no doubt about Timothy's involvement. The police believed his account of the evening contained some truth. He may have left the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby looking for her friends. Gabby knew Timothy as her friend's father. She might have approached him to ask where the other girls went. Then the man devised his plan. He could have told her they went into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to accompany her there. Once several hundred meters from the school, he might have attacked her, assaulted her, and killed her before returning to the game. The waiting for the trial stretched on for years, frustrating Gabby's family. They wanted justice for the culprit, but bureaucracy hindered progress. In 2019, 4 years after the murder, negotiations for a possible plea deal began. The prosecution offered to drop the death penalty in exchange for a life sentence if Timothy admitted his guilt. Gabby's parents agreed, as the endless wait for the trial was an ordeal for them. Additionally, when the trial finally began, they would have to endure months of hearings reliving their daughter's death. Timothy, who continued to assert his innocence, eventually accepted the deal and admitted his guilt. However, the conditions of the deal did not require him to disclose details of the crime. He only needed to admit his guilt. This outcome did not satisfy Gabby's relatives, who wanted the criminal to confess fully to what he did to their daughter. During the court session, Gabby's father shouted at Timothy, and the defendant's relatives yelled at Gabby's family. The judge had to pause the session and separate them. Ultimately, Timothy received a life sentence and was sent to a maximum security prison. Notably, in 2016, a year after Gabby's murder, something else related to Timothy Madden occurred. A boy from a neighboring state saw a news report about the crime on TV and recognized Timothy. Several years earlier, he and a friend were playing near a supermarket parking lot when an adult man approached them. The man persistently urged the boys to get into his car for a ride, but they found the offer suspicious. They ran away, and the friend's relative filed a police report. According to the second boy who saw the report, the man was indeed Timothy Madden. However, there was insufficient evidence in this case, so it stalled. Nevertheless, if Timothy had indeed attempted to abduct two boys in another state, it might reveal more about his true nature. Perhaps before Gabby's murder, he sought other victims unsuccessfully. That evening, when Gabby approached him near the stadium, he seized the opportunity to fulfill his monstrous desires. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.